The motion is agreed to. The clerk will report the nomination.
Nomination, the Judiciary, Landry B. McCafferty of New Hampshire to be United States District Judge for the District of New Hampshire.
Mr. President,
Majority Leader.
on behalf of the majority, I yield back 57.5 minutes.
Pursuant to the provisions of Senate Resolution 15 of the 113th Congress, there will now be up to 2 hours of post-cloture consideration of the nomination, equally divided in the usual form.
Mr. President,
Senator from New York.
as if in legislative session, I ask unanimous consent that if the Senate receives H.R. 3548 from the House of Representatives, the bill is identical to S. 1689 as introduced, then the bill be considered as having been read 3 times and passed, and the motion to reconsider be made and laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate.
Is there objections? Without objection? Senator from New York.
Mr. President, thank you, and I want to thank my colleagues in the Christmas spirit, despite these contentious times, for letting this bill move forward. Let me just briefly explain. On Christmas Eve 2012, 1 year ago today, the 125-member West Webster Volunteer Fire Association, a volunteer fire department outside Rochester, faced an unimaginable tragedy when 4 of their brave members were wounded, 2 fatally, when they responded to a fire but instead faced an ambush of unspeakable proportions. While many of our families across our nation were waking up to Christmas Eve morning to finish preparing Christmas dinner, shopping, wrapping presents, or picking up family from the airport, 4 families in Webster, New York were instead confronting a heart-wrenching tragedy. The call of a house on fire came into the West Webster Police Department at 5:30 a.m. that morning. December 24th, it was a cold, snowy morning, still dark, but the everyday heroes from the West Webster Fire Department courageously did what they volunteered to do on behalf of their neighbors and on behalf of their hometowns. They left their homes and families to put out a fire. Instead, this routine call turned into a tragedy which shocked this community and people throughout the country and even the world. What they didn't know was that the fire was intentionally set by the home's owner in order to lure these innocent firefighters into a senseless sniper ambush. The sniper was hiding behind a berm amid the chaos of the fire and began shooting at the responding firefighters. The firefighters were confused at first to hear popping sounds. They thought it might be the fire. But Lieutenant Mike Ciparini, who was also a Webster Department police officer, knew better and shouted to his his fellow volunteers, to take cover. But it was too late. Firefighter Hofstadter was shot in the pelvis while trying to alert dispatchers on the radio. Ted Scardino was shot in the shoulder, and 5 minutes later he was shot again in the leg. The 16-year volunteer lay there bleeding for an hour, enduring December cold while sustaining second-degree burns on his head. Lieutenant Ciparini and firefighter Kachuka. I'd ask unanimous consent that I be given an additional 3 minutes.
Without objection.
Thank you. Lieutenant Ciparini and firefighter Kachuka both died in the ambush. As news of this horrific, senseless Christmas tragedy spread, well-meaning people from Rochester, the Finger Lakes area, New York State, the nation, and the world reached out to West Webster Volunteer Firemen's Association to offer their support and prayers. Not realizing that collecting and distributing the funds to the families would jeopardize the association's tax-exempt status with the IRS, the association accepted donations from generous people all around the nation wanting to help the 4 families who suffered so on that day. They collected these donations for the victims and their families. They want to give these donations to the victims and their families. It defies reason that they'd be unable to do so because of a technicality in the tax code. And just as we did after 9/11, and again after a similar fire tragedy, department tragedy in California, it's our obligation to make sure the West Webster Volunteers Firemen Association can now distribute to these families the contributions their neighbors and unknown countless generous others wanted them to have. With the passage of this motion, that will happen. I want to thank my colleagues, particularly on the other side of the aisle. I know these are contentious times, and this was done truly in the Christmas spirit, and I thank them. And one brief more, we just nominated to the Supreme Court, we just confirmed the first woman to serve on the federal bench in the Western District of New York, Elizabeth Wolford. She's going to be a great judge. Ms. Wolford is right out of central casting for the role of the federal judge. Not only will the legal community of Western New York be well served by her ascension on the bench, the entire community will benefit from her leadership, wisdom, and judgment. It's an honor to have nominated the now confirmed Elizabeth Wolford, first woman to represent the Western District of New York on a very distinguished bench. I yield the floor.
The Senator from Missouri.
Mr. President, I want to talk a little bit about where we are right now. I mean, we're moving toward confirming a number of individuals with the majority deciding that the majority could do that by themselves. Apparently, they had the right to change the rules, which I guess means there really are no rules if the majority can change the rules any day they want to. But you know, what we're seeing now with the health care implementation is what happens, frankly, when one side decides, I don't want to make any effort necessary to get even one other person from the other side to agree with me on moving forward with something as big as the health care legislation. That should have been an example to us, but apparently the example was the example that, hey, the majority can do whatever the majority wants to do. Let me just share for a few minutes some of the things I'm hearing in our office from people who are contacting us to tell us the problems they're having that they didn't anticipate. This is a letter from Pam from Chesterfield, Missouri. She says, my husband and I have always played by the rules and carried insurance. I had no idea that we were going to have to change plans and go to the exchange, but our provider apparently doesn't want to have individual plans any longer because it's too costly to figure out the complexities that would apply to individual plans. And then Pam says, at least for now, my husband and I are not getting health insurance. And I guess we have to hope for the best. What a mess, she says. So much for playing by the rules. I never expected the two of us to be uninsured, but now she thinks that's what's likely to happen. Jennifer, a college student from St. Louis, said that she initially supported the Affordable Care Act. She works part-time at a home goods store where she had what she thought were great health benefits, at least the health benefits she wanted, and where she could work as many hours as she wanted. But she says because of the health care plan, her employers reduced the maximum number of hours she could work to 24 hours. So she says, my name is Jennifer. I'm a hard-working student from St. Louis, Missouri, and I'd like to share my emerging problems. At first, I was supportive of the idea of the Patient Protection and Affordable Health Care Act. Insurance for everyone, Jennifer says. That sounds so appealing. But now that it's affected my life in a negative way, I'm not so sure I can be supportive anymore. I have worked at my employer for almost 3 years while going to school. It's been an excellent place to work until now. And now not only do I not have the health care benefits that I had before, but I'm not able to work as much as I was able to work before. Carla and her husband, farmers from Orick, Missouri, they farm full-time. Neither of them is employed off the farm. They have 2 sons, one just graduated from college who just went to work, another's a junior in college. They have 1 full-time employee on the farm. Her family provides their own insurance. In order to them to have insurance, they've had a health savings account through Humana. Their deductible's been $10,000. They've still paid almost a little over $500 a month, $6,057 a year for their family insurance. But she tells me beginning January 1, 2014, their deductible goes to $12,600. Their premium goes to $11,422, an 89% increase in a family that provides their own insurance. And by the way, they provide insurance with dollars that they earn that they pay taxes on. So you can add another premium to that and find out how this family that had done all they could to have insurance for their family now has an 89% insurance and a deductible that they hope they never use, but if they do, it's a big problem if they use that deductible. The deductible was, what was it going to be, over $12,000 a year? If you're a family and you're paying $11,000 for your premiums, and then if you have health care needs, you pay another $12,000 before your insurance helps you, that's $23,000 a year before your insurance benefits you in any way for a family that had insurance coverage that until right now they thought was working for them and doing all they could to have it. Catherine from Springfield, Missouri says that a few weeks ago she was informed she was going to lose her health coverage because of the President's health care plan. She's been concerned that she might not be able to sign up because the website wasn't working. Whether the insurance cost more or not wasn't as big a concern to her as having insurance, but she says this in her letter to me. She says, "The nightmare that is Obamacare is going to affect us in a major way, and the stress of what is coming is affecting many, many people. Not only are we losing health insurance plans we liked, possibly the doctors we trust, but the new coverage is not as good and it costs us more. This is to paraphrase the Vice President, a big deal," she says. Ken from O'Fallon, Missouri, here's his letter to me. "Dear Senator Blunt, I'm writing to inform you of my recent experience with health insurance and the ACA. My wife and I make a decent income, but are far from wealthy. On September the 30th, I received a notice that due to the ACA, my employer-sponsored health insurance plan would no longer be available. Yesterday, after worrying about this since September 30th, apparently, yesterday, he continues in his letter, I discovered that my employer was able to renegotiate an early renewal, and our monthly premium will only increase by 12.5%. However, by the way, 12.5%, pretty good increase by any books except the ones that compare what's happening right now. However, he continues to say, I've been made aware that next year my plan premiums will increase by a minimum of 39%. So it increased 12.5% this year. They've already notified this family that their increase will be a minimum of 39% next year, and my deductible, according to him, will double. So I guess, reading his letter further, he says, so I guess I'll not be able to keep my insurance and my cost will not decrease as the President said they would. Carol from Republic, Missouri says her monthly premiums have gone from $600 to $800 a month, and the part-time jobs that she and her husband both had at the local community college have actually gone down because they're not able to teach as much as they were able to teach before, because the community college has decided they can't let any of their part-time faculty work more than 30 hours. So their income went down, their expenses went up, both cases because of the President's decisions on health care and the legislative decisions on health care, both cases because we know this has had impact at the workplace. Part-time workers, people holding their workforce down so they wouldn't be covered, holding their worker hours down so they wouldn't have to pay the penalty if they didn't offer insurance or offer the insurance for the first time at levels they hadn't had before. Now we're also seeing not only did the hours of work go down, but the cost of health insurance goes up. Surely we can come up with a better plan than that, Mr. President. Christian from St. Peters, Missouri, just learned that his wife's employer will start excluding him from their family coverage and that he now has to receive insurance in some different way. Looks like he's going to be able to do that with his employer for $1,300 more per year. This is actually the best story I've told so far. Only $1,300 that this family used to have to spend for something else, they're now spending for health care. He says this. He said, I'm not sure who Obamacare benefits, but it sure isn't my family. That's just an example of some of the things, Mr. President, we're hearing. Last weekend, I noticed that one of the architects of the President's health care bill, Dr. Zeke Emanuel, said on Fox News to Chris Wallace, he said, well, what the President really should have said, this is his exact quote, If you want to pay more for your insurance company that covers your doctor, you can do that. Well, I don't know what Dr. Emanuel's looking at, and you may be able to find your doctor for more money, but in our state, there's some of the health care providers that aren't on the exchange. In New Hampshire, I read the other day, more than half of the hospitals in New Hampshire aren't on the exchange. So if your doctor happened to work for more than half of the hospitals in New Hampshire, there is no amount of money you can pay on the exchange and keep your doctor, because your doctor is no longer available through the way that you're told by the Health Care Act that you can get insurance as an individual. You know, the President's promised that my plan, he said, begins by covering every American. If you already like your health insurance, the only thing that will change for you under this part is the amount of money you will spend on premiums, and that will be less. I think we're going to quickly see not only are people losing insurance, but for most people, the premiums are not going to be less, and the deductibles are going to be higher, not lower. This is going to be a story that is going to affect American families like nothing the federal government has done in a long time, maybe nothing the federal government's done ever. If you really want to impact the lives of families, impact their health care. Somebody told me one time that when everybody in your family is well, you've got lots of problems. When somebody in your family is sick, you've got one problem. We are dealing here with the one focusing problem for American families, their access to health care that they can afford with decisions they like, and I would yield back.
Pursuant to the order of February 29, 1960, the hour of 12 noon having arrived, the Senate having been in continuous session since yesterday, the Senate will suspend for a prayer by the Senate chaplain, Chaplain Black.
Let us pray. Eternal God, who gives us so much more than we deserve, when the days are dreary and the long nights weary, we are still indebted to you for your generous mercies. May your blessings provide our lawmakers with the willingness to see and do your will, living by the principles of your sacred revelation. May they do nothing to cause them shame. Give them respect for diverse viewpoints. Open their hearts to your love, their minds to your truth, and their wills to your service. We pray in your gracious name. Amen.
The Senator from North Dakota.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise to really continue the discourse that my esteemed colleague, the good senator from Missouri, was engaged here on the Senate floor just a minute ago, talking about the importance of bipartisanship as we work to craft policy for this country, policy that all Americans can support, and policy that truly moves our country forward. So whether we're considering nominations or whether we're considering legislation, we need to find ways to come together and come up with solutions that the American people support across the board in a bipartisan way. And so as we consider these nominations, we have to consider the fact that now the Senate will be approving these nominations with essentially one-party vote, 51 votes. Right now, the Democrat Party has the majority in the Senate so that they can put judges on the bench, confirm other nominations without any Republican support whatsoever. And of course, under that approach, at some point, the reverse may very well be true, that nominees may be confirmed, whether it's judicial nominees or other types of appointments, with only Republican votes if the Republicans are in the majority without any Democrat votes. Why does that matter? Well, why it matters is because, again, I go back to my earlier statement that in crafting policy, crafting laws, and in making appointments and nominations to the bench, we need to do it in a way where we garner broad support across the country. More than 300 million people's lives are affected dramatically by all of these things, by who those appointments are, the offices they hold, what they do, by who those judicial nominees are, by what they do, the laws we pass. So if we're going to impact everybody in the nation with these laws, with these appointments, we've got to make sure that there is input, consideration, buy-in, if you will, from both sides of the aisle. That's how we get to the kinds of policies, and we get the kinds of nominees, and we get the kinds of judges and justices that truly will have the support of people across this great country. And I believe that's what we need to truly build the kind of future that we want for ourselves and for our posterity. As we talk about nominees, we consider also implementation of the Affordable Care Act. There's a huge topic of discussion in our country right now, and is going to continue to be a huge topic of discussion. You're talking about 1/5 to 1/6 of our economy engaged in health care. So this is something that touches every single American in their daily lives in a big, big way. And so it's so important that we get it right. As was the case with my esteemed colleague from the state of Missouri, he was presenting anecdotes, presenting stories, real life stories of people who are impacted by the Affordable Care Act and how they're impacted. It's very important we do that because we need to know how people's lives are affected by the Affordable Care Act and what we can do to make sure that they have the best health care possible. And so by way, I think, of hopefully building bipartisan support to get the kind of health care reform we truly need, I'm going to present some of these real-life cases, just as my colleague from Missouri just did. And I'm going to start with one that talks about the marriage penalty created by Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act. And this is from someone in Grand Forks, North Dakota, who writes in about the marriage penalty created by the Affordable Care Act. This citizen writes, "My husband and I met with a primary health insurance carrier in North Dakota, and we're told that our current coverage under the guidelines of the Affordable Care Act will cost us at least another $400 more a month, and our deductible will increase from $2,000 to $12,000, and because we're married, we cannot choose individual plans, which would be a lower deductible. In essence, we're being penalized, being punished for being married. We are looking at paying more than $1,500 per month in health care because we're only 61 years old and not eligible for Medicare for another 4 years. That's $18,000 a year for health care. We were told that part of the problem is the provisions in the law require us to choose a plan that has maternity benefits. How does this make sense for seniors to be forced to buy coverage that does not apply to them? We agree that benefits shouldn't be denied to people, but it is not fair to be forced to buy coverage that does not apply." Well, let's delve a little deeper into exactly what this individual is writing about. I mean, what is this, the marriage penalty that is in fact created by Obamacare? Well, let's talk about that. The Obamacare tax subsidies actually create a marriage penalty. They create a disincentive for individuals who are cohabiting to become legally married. From the standpoint of marriage, the subsidies represent a hidden tax on marriage whereby married couples purchasing their coverage on the exchanges will be subsidizing similarly situated but cohabiting single adults who earn the same or more income. In 2011, the House Oversight and Reform Committee held a hearing on the topic of Obamacare's penalty against marriage. But since then, little has been devoted to this topic in the House or the Senate. So how does it work? How does it work? Well, it works through the requirement of household income when calculating the Obamacare tax subsidy. For those persons not eligible for Medicare, earning up to 400% of the federal poverty level, the law entitles them to a tax subsidy in the form of a refundable credit, so long as they purchase their coverage on the Obamacare exchanges. To calculate income, however, the law requires the reporting of household income rather than individual income. Household income includes the income of any family member residing in the household, such as a spouse, but not that of a cohabiting, unmarried partner. So when a person shops on the exchange website for a plan, he or she must first provide the financial information and identity of all family members in the household, even if none of those persons intend to purchase their insurance on the exchange, because that information is required to calculate subsidy eligibility. Subsidy eligibility is then calculated using a complicated formula involving household income in relation to the poverty line, family size, and the price of plans offered through a state's marketplace. The value of the subsidy awarded to an eligible person adjusts on a sliding scale in proportion to household income up to 400% of the federal poverty level. Above 400% of the federal poverty level, no tax credit, right? The marriage penalty results when a spouse's income causes an otherwise eligible individual to no longer be eligible for the subsidy and could cost a married couple in their household in excess of $10,000 a year in lost subsidies versus two individuals who are cohabiting but not married. So let's go through an example. According to the Kaiser Family Foundation, Kaiser Family Foundation's health reform subsidy calculator, a 62-year-old individual in a high-cost area who earns $46,000 a year, which is equivalent to 400% of the federal poverty level, would be entitled to $7,836 in a government tax credit. $7,836 in a government tax credit. However, if the same individual earns an additional $22 or $22 a year, just over $46,000 a year, which is now 401% of the federal poverty level, they lose the entire credit. They lose the entire $7,836 credit. Similarly, any married couple that earns more than $62,000, 400% of federal poverty level for a family of two, earns too much to qualify for a subsidy. But that same couple, if unmarried and cohabiting, could earn up to $45,960 each, or $91,920 total, and they're still eligible for subsidies in a high-cost area like New York State, for example. So the limit for a married couple is just over $62,000. Okay? So for a married couple, you can earn up to $62,040, okay, before you lose the credit. But it's almost $30,000 higher for two people living together who aren't married. They can earn $91,920 for an unmarried cohabitating couple. So if you have two people living together, they each get the individual exemption, which is more than $45,000, so they can earn $91,000 plus dollars together. They still get the credit. But for a married couple, $60,000, just over $60,000, $62,000, is the limit. So you can earn $30,000 more if you're living together and still get the credit than you can if you're married. That's the marriage penalty. So why would we design a health care program that discourages or penalizes marriage? Further, according to the Congressional Budget Office, the tax subsidies are projected to be the biggest deficit-increasing component of Obamacare. And CBO estimates that they will add $100 billion to the deficit by 2018 and grow even more thereafter. By 2019, CBO estimates that about 19 million people will be receiving the subsidies to purchase their insurance through the exchange. Like I say, I became aware of this problem when I was contacted by a North Dakota couple. I read that short vignette, and we looked into it, and it's in fact true. And this is just one of the many problems created by Obamacare or the Affordable Care Act, which is why Republicans have said, look, we need to replace this with a comprehensive, step-by-step, market-based approach that truly is focused on competition and choice, that empowers individuals, empowers people across this great nation to choose their own health care insurance and their own health care plan. And we could absolutely do that. And that's why I'm here on the floor, others are here on the floor, continuing to talk about Americans in their everyday lives and the challenges that they face because of Obamacare. And I've got more of these stories from North Dakotans, people in my state who are facing real challenges because of Obamacare. And because so often you hear that charge, well, wait a minute, if we're not going to do the Affordable Care Act, if you don't like the Affordable Care Act, well, then what's your solution? Well, we continue to put solutions forward, solutions like expanded health savings accounts, which combined with high deductible policies can create tremendous incentive for young people to purchase health care, like more competition across state lines that can help give citizens more choice and reduce cost. Things like tort reform that can help bring down costs, reforming Medicare to create the right incentives, giving states more control over Medicaid, and the list goes on. And we will continue to advocate for those types of solutions, real solutions that empower Americans to choose their own health care insurance and their own health care provider. Let me read some more reports from North Dakotans who talk about the challenges that they're facing because of the Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act. This individual is from Hankinson and writes, I am writing about the health care mess Obamacare is creating. I'm a retired teacher running a daycare with my wife, hence I'm self-employed. I buy my own health care through Medica. Under the new Obamacare rules, my monthly premium is going from $302 per month to over $500 a month. I'm 58 years old, not on any medications, and have no illnesses. Because of this forced health care, I am supposed to pay a 60% increase in health care coverage, and if I drop my health care coverage, the government will hunt me down and fine me. Please stop this Obamacare boondoggle. From Harvey, North Dakota, disgruntled grandpa who has to pay for maternity care. Quote, the Affordable Health Care Act is an excellent example of an oxymoron. Since the Affordable Care Act was passed, my insurance rate has escalated an additional $4,000 per year, not the $2,500 reduction that President Obama speculated. I've yet to find anyone whose health care costs have declined. Oh, yes. I just received my cancellation notice from Blue Cross Blue Shield. Thank you very much. I was happy with my Blue Cross Blue Shield plan. I had a low deductible, prescription and hospital coverage, everything that I needed. Now, as a grandfather, I will be paying for maternity, pediatric dentistry, contraception, drug, alcohol recovery, etc. The government has bloated my policy with useless fluff so my premiums will support others' subsidized policies. The President said, quote, "If you like your health care plan, you can keep it, period," end quote. The truth is, if you can't afford health insurance, you can afford Obamacare if someone else pays the premium for you. Also, all these years I've paid taxes on things that I possess or purchase. Please explain why I have to pay a tax if I choose not to purchase Obamacare. From Fargo, North Dakota, retired couple faced with canceling their own wellness center membership to pay for Obamacare. This individual writes, quote, "Last week, Blue Cross Blue Shield of North Dakota sent my wife and I a letter stating that the health insurance coverage we carry is no longer acceptable or allowable under the new health care law. It was a health insurance package that we had selected after retiring from the field of education 2 years ago. It was a great package for us since we are both in good health. It offered us lower premiums, a higher deductible, which, by the way, we wanted, and more than adequate coverage for us. Now we have to look at other more expensive health care packages which we do not want, some of which will include wellness, some of which will include wellness center coverage. Well, we go to a wellness center here in Fargo, pay for it ourselves, and it costs us considerably less than any of the new packages that include it. So if I have this right, the following needs to take place for us. One, we can no longer keep our present insurance that we wanted to begin with. Two, we can, however, select another package that will cost us, at the very least, an additional $1,800 in premiums per year. Remember, this is being paid for out of our retirement check. Three, the plans include a wellness center option, which we currently have at our own expense at a cost of $600 a year. So based on the law's requirements, it will cost us another $1,200 if we discount our current $600 wellness costs over and above what we now pay. All of this for insurance we don't want. There's an old saying from our neck of the woods: if you want something screwed up, give it to the government. Sorry, but this new law makes that old saying prophetic. From Bottineau, North Dakota, couple face cancer treatment and tripling costs with Obamacare. Here's my story on Obamacare. I have a Blue Cross Blue Shield policy that I've had for many years. This individual writes, in 2008, my wife was diagnosed with a very aggressive breast cancer. We did all the treatments, the surgeries, etc. The insurance paid all but the deductible and the coinsurance, just as it was supposed to. We had no problems. Our deductible has been $500 with an 80-20 copay up to an out-of-pocket maximum of $5,000. Now my wife's cancer has reoccurred, and we are starting all over. On the Affordable Care Act policy, to keep my premium close to what we have had, our deductibles will be $4,000 each, and our out-of-pocket maximum will be $12,500 per year. By the way, the premium will be over $1,200 per month, an increase of over 140%. That is not affordable care. So which policy is more substandard? Retired couple from Fargo, North Dakota writes, upon visiting with my Blue Cross Blue Shield rep, he informed me that our present affordable plans, we currently have 2 single plans, one for each of us, will no longer exist under the Affordable Care Act. We'll have to switch over to Blue Direct, which does not allow single plans but family plans only. This will then force us to pay $1,200 per month, or $14,400 per year, compared to our present cost of $6,000 per year. Let me repeat that. This will then force us to pay $1,200 a month, or $14,400 per year, compared to our present cost of $6,000 per year. What sense does that make? Why do I want to give up a plan that is one I selected for us and is very affordable and change it over for one that will cost us another $8,400 per year? I can definitely see where this is headed. It will send both my wife and I back to the workforce to be able to pay for a health insurance policy that we do not want. So why can't I keep my health insurance policy that I already have? I like it. I want to keep it. But Uncle Sam says no. Why? I understand the need to take care of those who don't have insurance and can't get insurance for medical reasons, but why take away from millions of us that do have insurance and want to keep it? And you've seen that in the numbers, right? Believe that Secretary of Health and Human Services, Catherine Sebelius, testified in front of the House either yesterday or the day before and indicated that there are something like 360-some thousand sign-ups for Obamacare, but the statistics are in the range of 4 to 5 million as far as the number of policies that have been canceled, that have been reported as canceled so far since Obamacare came into effect. And so these stories, these are the real stories behind those statistics. These are the real-life stories of people who have been impacted behind those statistics. From Bismarck, North Dakota, a young working family who's seeing their costs skyrocketing. Quote, "Dear Senator Hoeven, I'm a young pharmacist in Bismarck, graduated from North Dakota State University in 2011. I have the job I've always wanted, although it's with a small pharmacy, and so my employer cannot afford health insurance for the 7 employees who work there. So my family and I went out and did the responsible thing, qualified medically, back when you had to, and bought what I thought was the perfect health insurance plan. For the whole family, it was this easy. High deductible, no coverage except preventative, until we paid $2,500 per person or $5,000 per family. My premium started out at an amazing $666 a month in 2011 and went up a few dollars in 2012 and increased by 12% in 2013 to $762.30 a month. Still quite affordable. This year we had our 3rd child. Let me see if I get that right. My premium started out at, started out at $666. Now that premium's at $762. Still quite affordable. This year we had our 3rd child, along with experiencing some health issues with one of our other children. My wife obviously met her $2,500 maximum and ended up needing surgery and nearly died from complications and spent a couple nights in the hospital. My insurance worked just like it was meant to. That meant that $7,000 hospital bill was paid 100%. As of now, we've only paid $4,100 in out-of-pocket costs. I think that's pretty darn good coverage for that premium. My policy doesn't qualify for the new Affordable Care Act regulations, and so it will end at the end of April, according to Blue Cross Blue Shield. Fine, whatever. But what really upsets me is that my current coverage, which assumes a lot of responsibility on myself, falls into the gold category on the Obamacare exchange based on the maximum out-of-pocket limits. We're a young, generally healthy family. I don't need to save nickels and dimes throughout the year to cover co-pays and whatnot. I need a responsible limit that I know I'm not going to spend over, period. On the exchange, if I match my same premium, then I end up with a maximum out-of-pocket limit of $12,700. $12,700. How affordable is that? If I want a similar plan if I want a plan similar to the plan I have now, then I have to spend over $900 a month or $150 a month more. That's $2,000 per year more for coverage I do not like. This is very frustrating. Please fix this mess. From Kensal, North Dakota. This is from a family that is unable to afford the rising premiums. I just got an insurance letter that said my family's monthly premium was going from $385 to $840 per month. I'm going to read that again. I just got an insurance letter that said my family's monthly premium is going from $385 to $840 per month. I cannot afford that and keep the heat on this winter. That represents over half of my take-home pay. I'm now thinking that I'll have to get divorced just to be able to keep my health insurance for our 3 children and my wife. Keep the government shut down forever if this is how you want to treat the hardworking class. From Donnybrook. Self-employed family, business owners that see their costs going up. My husband and I farm and have 3 children, ages 4, 2, and 7 months old. Because we're self-employed, we carry our own health insurance. Last week, we received notice that our premiums will be increasing by 43% due to the Affordable Care Act. We will also be losing the freedom to cater our health plan to meet our individual needs. We are very healthy non-smokers, and our children have yet to see a physician for anything more than a well-child checkup. Our health history is spotless. Our previous premiums were anything but cheap, making this 43% premium increase unbelievable to us and unaffordable. From Argosville, North Dakota, self-employed, having their policy canceled. About a year ago, my husband left his job and started his own computer software consulting company. Contrary to what we've been led to believe, we were able to find affordable insurance for our family. We have 3 children under 18. We found a family policy for about $480 a month. About $480 a month. This past year, 2013, it was moderately increased to about $520 per month, which we thought was a reasonable increase. We were very happy with the insurance. However, today I received a letter stating that due to the new health care law, our insurance premium for the next year would go up to $918.21. So they're going from $520 a month to $918.21 a month. This means we're facing a $400 per month increase in our insurance premium. This amounts to a $4,800 tax increase for our family. We're a middle-income, small business-owning family. This is an outrageous intrusion by the federal government into an area that it had no business going. It was possible for the self-employed to get their own insurance. There was a safety net through state and federal programs for people who couldn't get insurance. The Affordable Care Act is not affordable, and it was not ever necessary. From Enderlin, North Dakota, small business loses employee coverage. And what you're seeing is people in all different walks of life in different situations, some working for themselves, some working for small businesses, some working for large companies, some retired, some with kids, some elderly. But what's the consistent theme? What's the consistent theme? Higher cost, less choice, and not being able to get policies that fit their needs because of this standardization. From Enderlin, North Dakota, a constituent writes, quote, "My husband is a veterinarian who's been in practice for over 40 years. We have 5 employees for which we provide the best health coverage that money can buy. We pay all their premiums. Last week we received a cancellation letter from the insurance company. We believe President Obama when he said that because we had insurance for our employees and because we had less than 50 employees, we could keep our insurance. At no time did we receive information by letter or email or on the Internet about the fact that if you changed anything in your policy, you would not be grandfathered in. We had one person retire, hired a new employee, an employee's husband came onto the policy, changing the deductible, which has meant that we now have lost our insurance. This will mean a much larger premium. We work. We're not happy about this situation. The President lied. This will mean no raises, and we will not be able to hire anyone else. Park River, North Dakota. This is about rising costs for some young people. Our family has had health insurance all of our adult lives. My son, age 28, also had his own health insurance with Blue Cross Blue Shield of North Dakota. He is single. His policy was canceled because of Obamacare. His premiums are now tripled, and his deductible will be over $6,400 a year. That's unacceptable. No person can afford to pay a $6,400 deductible. If he fell into the poverty level to be eligible for the tax subsidy, then he could get better coverage for less money under this law. That is also unacceptable. We all have worked to afford health insurance on our own, and now it is not affordable, nor are the deductibles affordable. He was happy with his old policy, one that he could afford, and with better coverage for him. Now the government is mandating what he can afford. How is this acceptable? Got one more that I'm going to read. This is from a young family in Thompson, North Dakota. And in this case, the family's policy was canceled just before they had a baby that was going to be born. Quote, my daughter and her husband are expecting their first child in January, and on Friday they received a letter from their insurance carrier stating that due to the new health reform law, they would no longer be covered. So in January, when the baby is to be born, they may have no health insurance. Our president stated on more than 28 different occasions that if you liked your health insurance, you could keep it. My question to you is, what are you going to do about it? Will you hold him accountable for his word? That's why we're, as you listen to all these real-life stories from people in my state, and they reflect stories from people across this country, that's why it's so important that we do get the kind of health care reform that this country needs, that these citizens so very much want. And I think it truly makes a difference. As we debate this important issue, I think it makes an incredible difference. This isn't me just saying, okay, we need to do it, or any one of us saying, okay, this is what we need to do. You're hearing from Americans, in this case from my state in North Dakota, but as members come down and speak on the floor on this issue, you're hearing from 300 million Americans across this great country. You're hearing real stories about real hardship and what they're going through. And so I go back to where I started this discussion, and that is why it is so important that as we approach these issues, we take a hard look at Obamacare and the Affordable Care Act. It was passed with only Democrat votes, no Republican votes whatsoever. And it's, as I said before, if we're going to get the kind of policies that truly work for the American people, we have got to come up with policies that can garner bipartisan support from both sides of the aisle. And I truly believe they have to be the kind of policies that empower our people, to choose their own health care provider, that empower them to choose their own health care insurance. And I go back to the types of solutions that I talked about earlier. These are the kinds of solutions that we've put forward in legislation and that we will continue to put forward in legislation, and ask for members of this body and the House to join us on a bipartisan basis and pass market-based solutions that truly empower people. Things like expanded health savings accounts combined with high deductible policies. Think about young people. Think about young people going out into that market and buying health care insurance, maybe for the very first time. Maybe they've been operating without health care insurance, and they say, you know what, I've got to get health care insurance. But think about it. Think about what works for them. You take a health savings account, a high deductible policy, low premium, they're healthy, don't think they're going to get sick. That's the kind of thing that will encourage them to buy health insurance. And if you have more choice and more competition. Not only are they going to get it at a more affordable price, but they're going to have more options to choose from. Likewise, let's make sure that we provide for more competition across state lines. So they're not just then looking at the companies in their state, but companies from across the country. More choice, more competition brings down prices. As we look at health care costs, let's look at tort reform. No question that lawsuits are driving the cost of health care higher. We can do something about that. Affordability is a huge issue that we've got to address as part of the right kind of reforms for health care. And when we talk about reforms, we have got to reform Medicare to create the right incentives. What do I mean by that? Right now under Medicare, if you live in a state where you have high costs, then regardless of outcome, the federal government provides more reimbursement under Medicare in that state than they do in a state that has lower costs, even though they may have better outcomes. Does that make sense? Think about it. Think about that for a minute. So you've got Medicare, right? Vitally important health care for our seniors across this nation. But the incentive is not to reduce costs under the way the program works. It actually increases costs because states with higher costs, regardless of outcome, get higher reimbursement under Medicare than states with lower costs, even if the states with the lower costs have better outcomes. Let's reform Medicare to have the right kind of incentives to encourage savings, to encourage better outcomes, to encourage preventive care. We can do that. That's a win-win. You get better care at a more affordable price, and you help address the deficit and the debt of this nation. Those are the kinds of reforms that work for all Americans. Or Medicaid. Medicaid provided for individuals with low income. Let's empower the states. Let's give the states more flexibility, more control. Rather than a federal one-size-fits-all, give those states more control to truly not only improve health care outcomes, but to do so at affordable cost and reward them for controlling costs. These are the kind of solutions that will not only produce better health care, that I believe that our providers can get behind and support because it rewards them for managing costs and good outcomes, which is what we want, but it also truly is how we address the deficit and make sure that we save these programs, Medicare and Medicaid, and keep them sound for the future so that we not only can rely on them today, but for years and years to come. We make sure that we save and protect those programs by creating the right kind of reforms. Those are the kind of reforms that truly empower people, and give them the opportunity, which I think we all want, to choose our own health care providers and our own health care insurance. As we go through these issues, again, I want to emphasize the need, and I come back to the reason that I'm here on the floor today, not only to talk about the right kind of health care reform, but back to the issue before us on the Senate floor today, the nominations that we face, and determining how we come together as a Senate, as a body, and we get members on both sides of the aisle to come together and say, okay, how do we make sure that we have bipartisan solutions, that we create a bipartisan Senate, where we're not only making sure that as we look at confirmation of these nominees, that there's an investment from both sides in getting it right, and that there's input and deliberation and consideration and debate on getting it right for the American people. But whether it's health care, whether it's energy, whether it's good ag policy, whether it's law enforcement, whether it's support for our military, whether it's anything else, how do we make sure that all of us, because it's incumbent upon all of us, how do we make sure that we've protected what this institution has provided for since the inception of our country? And that's bipartisan consideration, deliberation, and debate that produces the best outcome for the American people. And we have nominations that we're going through now and that we will continue to go through. We have important policy matters that we need to get done now for the American people. A budget, defense reauthorization, defense of our nation, a farm bill that needs to be passed, energy policy that we need to address, all things that can truly move our country forward. As we do that, we need to, Mr. President, we need to come forward with solutions that will truly be bipartisan. And to do that, we need to have a very sincere and direct dialogue as a body and member to member to come up with solutions, to determine how we're going to make sure that we're doing the very best job for the American people. That's what this is all about. We're here to do the work of the American people. And, you know, as we look across this vast, wonderful nation, there are people who are Democrats, and there are people who are Republicans, and there are people who are independents, and we serve that whole spectrum. We serve them all. And we are faced with a real challenge right now to make sure that that bipartisanship continues in this Senate and in this Congress. I'm going to turn to another matter that I think is incredibly important that is before us. It's a matter that I had hoped, it's a matter that is truly bipartisan. It is bipartisan. And I'm going to use this as an example of how bipartisanship can and does work in this body and in the House. It's a matter that I think we should be voting on right now. And it's a matter that I sincerely hope we are voting on in a few short weeks when we return, and that's the Farm Bill. I am a member of the Ag Committee, a member of the Ag Appropriations Committee. I'm also a member of the Conference Committee that is working to reconcile the differences between the Farm Bill that's been passed in the House and the Farm Bill that has been passed in the Senate. And I bring this example up purposely because we are focused on how we operate in a bipartisan manner to meet the challenges this nation faces. And we're at that point where we need to renew the Farm Bill. We need to put a new long-term 5-year Farm Bill in place. Right now we're operating under an extension. And I use this as an example of truly a bipartisan approach. And I use it for another reason, too. As we go through this process where confirmation of nominations are now being done essentially on a partisan basis, not a bipartisan basis, but on a partisan basis. As we talk about Obamacare, which was passed on a partisan basis, not a bipartisan basis, I want to bring up an example of how it should work on a bipartisan basis. When you look at the Farm Bill, the breakdown in terms of how the vote goes hasn't been Republican and Democrat. You've had both. You've had some Republicans and Democrats voting against it, some Republicans, some Democrats voting for it. It really is focused on what is the policy and what best serves this great nation. And here's the other thing. Here's the other reason I bring it up right now. We are trying to address the deficit and the debt that this country faces, right? This year, CBO says that the deficit is going to be somewhere between $650 and $700 billion. The deficit. The debt, $17.3 trillion. We must address the deficit and the debt. So as we work on a new Farm Bill, we're not only reforming the Farm Bill, the current Farm Bill, which is operating under an extension, we not only make reforms that make for a better farm program, but we're going to save on the order of $25 to $30 billion to help reduce the deficit and the debt. Isn't that what we should be doing across government? Across government, on a bipartisan basis, coming up with better policy that actually reduces the deficit and the debt, controls spending, reduces spending, and helps our economy grow. That's what we're doing with the Farm Bill, and that's what we should be doing in these other areas as well. So as we continue to work on the farm program, I had hoped that we could be to the point where we're voting this week or next on this Senate floor and in the House as well. It doesn't look like that's going to happen, but we are very close, and I believe we can have a framework in place this week or next so that we can vote on it as soon as we return in January, and that's what we need to do. Current Farm Bill, current extension expires at the end of the year, meaning we need to get a new Farm Bill in place. Not an extension, a new Farm Bill. And we have put the framework in place. We are there. We now just need to get people to agree, and we need to get the bill to the House and the Senate floor. I believe we are absolutely there. We just have to have the will to make it happen. And we have to have the will to make it happen on a bipartisan basis. And I believe not only is it vitally important that we pass this Farm Bill, but that it truly can be an example in terms of how we approach other policy as well on a bipartisan basis. At this point, Mr. President, I see that the leader is here, and I would ask of the chair as to my time allotment and also the time for the next vote.
All time has now expired.
All right.
The question is on the McCafferty nomination.
And the question is on the McCafferty nomination.
Is there a sufficient second?
Is there a sufficient second? There appears